All right, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Welcome one and all, new person and returning friends. Appreciate you choosing to listen today. If you were here last week, I'm very happy to report that the pain flare-up that I was grappling with has subsided. I'm feeling a lot better. I will add that the way that came about wasn't because of any particular exercises or asana or retraining my movement patterns. As far as I could tell, at least in this instance, really comes down to shifts of perception and states of mind. And maybe some spirit, which we'll talk about later. We'll talk about that some today in my conversation, and maybe on the other side I'll mention something about that more. But I am feeling a whole lot better, and that process of getting myself to the right mind state and perceptual lens where I'm not in pain, that really, for me, has been about trying to find an attunement to the natural rhythms of things. And I'm shocked to hear myself use that language, because those of you who know me for many, many years ago, I would have never said such a thing, attuned to the rhythms of nature. But here's what I would say. There's a couple of things I've been doing, which some people might think of as kind of like hacks, like biohacks, but I don't think of them that way at all. I've talked about this some on the show before. The first one is I've continued to use those blue light blockers. If you remember, I had that guy on a little while back. I had bought those blue light blockers that I do wear at night, and I started putting them on even earlier than I used to, and it definitely changed my sleeping patterns. It definitely has helped. I mean, at least as far as I can observe in my quality of sleep and ability to fall asleep. And I've suffered from insomnia a lot of years, so it works better than like CBD oil and other things I've tried. So blue light blockers. And again, for me, that's not because I want to like optimize my output or performance. It's just I want to sleep well and feel better. And the other thing that I've been doing is I'm kind of all in on toe spacers and barefoot shoes. You might remember I mentioned this, I think, some while back. I started to get like a bunion on one foot and started out with just like one of those little silicone wedges that you put between your two front toes. And I wore that for a little while and did kind of something. And then I moved on to toe spacers, like a couple of different iterations of them, actually. And it's made a huge difference. The shape of my feet changed because I realized that my feet just were shaped like shoes and socks, not like feet. And so I've been playing around with this, and now it's like I feel like there's no going back. Like I try to put on an old pair of shoes of mine, and it just feels like my feet are being bound. And I feel like I walk different. I place my feet different. And again, a lot of people, I think of this as sort of like, I don't know, kind of biohacks. But to me, it's sort of trying to restore what seems to me to be like some function and sensitivity that's been lost or that's been suppressed or something. And more than anything, just giving up on like expectations about what I'm supposed to do or who I'm supposed to be, being nice to myself and just trying to, do the best you can. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing the best I can. And all of that amounted to me not feeling that pain in my back and like being okay and feeling like I can be more present to my wife and my daughters and just let go of whatever it was I was thinking I needed to do, So, for whatever that's worth, I don't know if that means anything to anybody. It's a weird alchemy of wanting to inquire and learn and take in information, but maybe not coming with too much heat. That's another thing that we talk about today with my guest, Acharya Shunya. And we talk about different ways that people come as a seeker with more heat or less heat and what happens because of that. And I think sometimes I come in with too much heat, you know? And if I can have a cooler mind, then I'm able to better make choices about what to do and how to address pain when it comes up and stuff. So, in any case, as I mentioned, my guest today is Acharya Shunya. And she is the first female lineage holder of a Vedic wisdom holder tradition. And it was so fantastic to have an opportunity to delve into some of my questions around Vedas and gurus and, like I was saying, spirit and higher powers and the sources and wisdom cultures that yoga stems from. So it very much felt like a blessing to have had this opportunity to talk with Shunya, and I'm so happy to be sharing it with you today. Real quick before we get to that, I do want to express some gratitude to our podcast premium subscribers because they truly are the sponsors of this show. Today, I want to say thank you to Anne-Sophie Gragnon and Prabha Sinha. Cheers to you both. Both of them longtime friends of the show. Prabha, what's up to you? It's been too long since I've seen you. If you're hearing this, I hope it's finding you well. If you're new around here, the most recent 52 episodes of the show are always part of the public feed. We do also have a podcast premium subscription where you get access to the full archives and you sponsor the show. It's choose your rate, cancel anytime. If you go back into the archives and there's this episode that you're like, oh, dying to listen to, and you don't have any money, email us. We'll totally hook you up. But if you had even just a little bit of money, you could totally make a difference and help keep this ball rolling. To learn more about becoming a podcast premium subscriber or find out about any of my other stuff, I've got ongoing classes and discussion groups that you are welcome to be a part of. All of that stuff can be found at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, y'all. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead and get to it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Acharya Shunya. Hello?
Hello there.
Hello, Shunya.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. My name is Jay. Such a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, Jay.
I don't know if you've listened to the show before, but I am already recording, and I would like to consider us having just begun, if that's okay with you.
Oh, absolutely. We are always begun, so let's go for it.
Lovely, lovely. I'm not surprised that you are game in the way that you just articulated. Let me also take a quick moment just to shout out our mutual friend, Kelly, because without her, we would not have been brought together. I'm very grateful for her making me aware of you. And when I asked her if she knew anybody that she thought would be good for me to speak with on the show, without hesitation, she said, oh, you have to speak Acharya Shunya. And I thought, okay, so I think that in getting ready, I could really see why you're offering something important. It's very resonant with me, and I think it'll be resonant with the people listening. So thank you so much for giving me this time today. I really do appreciate it.
Awesome. And it's totally my honor. And thank you, Kelly.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Indeed. Well, there's so many things I would like to talk with you about. It's almost hard to find a good place to start. But I think one place to start for people listening who maybe are not familiar with you would be to talk about the spiritual lineage that you're the head of, that you're the lead of. I don't know if you think of it as the head or the lead. I don't know what the right word is. But I was wondering if you would say something about your grandfather, because he seems to me to be the person who really put you on this path.
Yeah, Baba Ayodhyanath was the name of my grandfather, and he was born in the year 1900 in India, and he was the son of a legendary sage-like teacher, Acharya Shanti Prakash. I was born in a family of acharyas, and acharya is an ordained teacher. And this has been an exclusive all-male lineage of teachers, beautiful teachers who believed in equality and justice. But it took my Baba to return the lineage back to its Vedic roots, because the Vedas, which are the earliest teachings, the spiritual expression coming out of India, they were written not only by male seers called rishis, but rishikas, female seers too. And they talk about that great supreme truth dwelling in all beings, no matter their gender, color, preference. And so when I was 9, Jay, I think Baba knew that I'm going to be having this conversation. And he told me that I would travel abroad and I would establish the Vedas for the modern world. And I didn't know what abroad meant. Of course, we were speaking in our native tongue, but I didn't know what that meant. And I thought he'll pack me off to Sri Lanka, because that was the only foreign country I knew around me. But gradually, as I grew older, his belief transformed into a self-belief. And here I am, trying to uphold the roots of the Vedic knowledge. I teach from those beautiful scriptures and texts. And at the same time, I try to make that knowledge sensible to the modern person and all the sorrow that we are still experiencing despite our technological advancements.
Mm. Well, I want to ask you about the Vedas, because, in yoga teacher trainings in the modern world, and for myself and many people who are my peers, I came into yoga in like the early 90s when it was really first becoming kind of mainstream here in the United States, like the very early beginnings of it. And at that time, the teachers I had, they had gone to India and they had met gurus, and then they had come back and set up shop. And it still had like one foot in, I don't know what to call it, the mystical past of yoga. And then as things got more mainstreamed more and more, asana became the focus. And, when they talk about yoga philosophy and yoga teacher training, a lot of times it would be a very cursory consideration of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And maybe they'd get like a little bit of a reference to Vedas, but it seems like in my own personal inquiry, it's kind of hard for a Westerner to learn about Vedas if you don't know Sanskrit, because it seems like it's open to such wide interpretation, like depending on who is presenting the Vedas, I would get a very different idea. And I guess my question for you is that in my limited ability to try to read and understand about the Vedas, it did feel to me that like things that were in the Rig Veda, like earlier teachings, seemed to be of like almost a different character to like the latter periods of Vedas, where at the beginning it felt like people going inside and divining wisdom from within, but then later it was all about like the rites and rituals and doing the puja exactly right and like a priestly caste. So when you say that there were these 27 female authors of the Vedas, is that from an earlier period, or was it spread throughout even in the latter time when there was more of like this harsh hierarchical Vedic culture that came about later?
I'll answer your questions through two answers. The first answer is around how the Veda becomes what people choose to opine about it. and how the Vedic knowledge and tradition is misunderstood. And often the teachers from India who may know better also choose to only speak about something mystical, like they'll reduce the Vedic wisdom to a practice, a 20-minute meditation, a chakra balancing technique. And then their Western counterparts would know no better. And so the Vedas became misunderstood and an umbrella term. And that is why through my work, through my books, through my foundations, anything I teach or write, I always connect back to the source scripture, whether it is a Veda Samhita or like a Riga, Yajur, Atharva, or is it an Upanishad? So I always connect back to it, and I try to give a greater introduction to the Veda and try to define its lifestyle, its goal, and what the do's and don'ts of a Vedic way of life, which is really Sanatana Dharma, living a dharmic or a conscious way of life. And I'm hoping that my presence and the work I do and the work my disciples will do in the future is going to close some of that gap. And there are now earnest teachers, both from the East and the West, who are beginning a more methodical, systematic exposition of the Veda in the West, because there are very sincere seekers to be found in the West, sometimes as sincere as the people we find in India. And they deserve to know, because the Vedic wisdom is universal, and it brings about an awakening at every level of one's life, not just spiritual, but psychological and social too. Regarding your second question, really the Vedic tradition is limited to the Veda Samhitas, the Riga Veda, the Yajurveda, Sam, and Atharva. And the later portion of those Samhitas is known as the Upanishads. Gradually, that Sanskrit, which is in the Veda, that Sanskrit became difficult to read and interpret, because this is a pre-Parninian or pre-systematic Sanskrit. And so you need a special knowledge to read those Vedas, to interpret them. The Parninian Sanskrit, or the Sanskrit that became systematized by the grammarian Panini, came later. And as a result, the Vedas plus Upanishad, which is really the Vedas, the beginning part of the Veda, the Samhita, talks about how to lead teaches about dharma, or teaches about a conscious way of life, family life, dealing with animals, how to understand agriculture, seasons, cosmic rhythms, ecology, and that kind of consciousness that makes a human being not just a user and abuser of the universe, but a trustee of our planet. And the latter part of the Veda is the Upanishad, which goes beyond dharma into moksha or mukti, or the path to transcendence. But as the Sanskrit became harder to interpret and esoteric, a breed of interpreters were born known as Purohitas. This was an exclusive male breed of interpreters, translators, so-called transmitters, and ritual keepers, and if you ask me, in brackets, dogma makers. These were all priests, and this all-male priest class, they embedded this belief that the Veda shouldn't forget writing the Veda, contributing to the Veda. It should not even be read by women. And gradually the girl child was forbidden to study the Veda. The women were kept away from wherever Vedic teachings were happening. And they interpreted the Veda from a ritualistic perspective, and they denigrated it, and they reduced it to very difficult to understand verses and teachings, and that's why Veda to an average Indian or an Hindu is nothing but a mishmash of rituals and words and chants. And so acharyas like myself, and there are many others like me who are educated into the word and the symbolism and the depth of the Veda, which is way beyond rituals. Do you know that there is no deity worship in the Veda? Do you know that there is no temples and ritualistic temple worshipping in the Vedas? The Vedas is all about dharma and moksha, but this was forgotten, and so the current Hinduism that we find is a strange and a different growth that has occurred upon the Vedic Sanatana Dharma expression. Of course, it contains some beautiful elements, and the prayers and the mantras of Hinduism and even the symbolism of the deity is great, but the average expression and understanding of these rituals in an average Hindu is so reduced and so material and so limited that acharyas like myself feel isolated and alone as a voice saying, come back to the Veda. It will teach you how to be humane again, how to think for yourself, how to be emotionally sovereign, and how to truly lead a life of abundance, fulfillment, compassion, and power. But that message is lost, and people are busy propitiating the gods and goddesses like there's no tomorrow. And as a result, you are right, Jay. There are two Vedic cultures, the original, which is misunderstood, and the current, which kind of says that the Veda is our holy book, but it's a bunch of stories and a bunch of rituals that are meaningful in a given context, but in a general sense, they do a disservice because I feel like they do not allow the average Hindu to really know what was their heritage.
Well, thank you for that. I guess I'm curious, that idea of essentially there being like a source wisdom that wasn't bound by these patriarchal, hierarchical power structures. It seems like that played out in your own life, though, because as I learned about you, you did have to break from cultural mores in order to be who you are. Do you think that your grandfather saying that to you when you were 9, was that part of him wanting to, like, I don't know, resist those kinds of forces? Or why did your father not become an Acharya, the leader before you? Like, did your father play a role, or it seemed like you became the leader instead of your father? Is there something to that?
There is something to that. My father didn't become a spiritual teacher because he grew up in the 1950s of India, where there were more opportunities for a spiritual family in the holy city of Ayodhya, and so my father chose to become a professional in the world of India and a playwright, but his spiritual roots continued. So he continued to write in newspapers and magazines and books about spirituality and dharma. But he did turn down a deeper study, and my grandfather respected that because in the true tradition, your swadharma has to be upheld, and swadharma is your deep inner soul propensity. And my swadharma from a young age was that of a mystical quest. And whereas my father's swadharma was different, he was seeking to be a creative person and writing and imagination and theater. So my father went on to become one of the most awarded and recognized playwrights in India today. He has what is known as the Padma Shri the highest honor from the President of India for the work he did. And I'm sure the fact that he meditates every day and he's inwardly detached and a yogi, despite life's ups and downs, has something to do with it. But but when you are in a true lineage, or say you are growing up, Jay, with a true teacher, the true teacher does not prescribe or mandate or force to continue a blood lineage. They seek the best leader. And despite some male cousins, I was chosen. So the leader is chosen based on their swabhava, or their nature, their deep swadharmic propensity. And as a very young child, I was attracted to the Sanskrit language, to the Vedic chanting, to following him around, and even hiding behind some things to listen to his lecture when I was not allowed in his classroom. And I was just curious. I didn't know that I'm curious, but I was. And I love climbing trees a lot too. So just a regular child. But my
climbing trees and listening to Sanskrit, there's something the same there, maybe.
Climbing trees. And I did have an experience, Jay, on the trees where I felt like I saw, Rama, Krishna with me on the trees. And then Baba said that we see who we seek. And so it was not decided whether it was real or it was an imagination. It was okay. It was my experience to own. And so I was chosen. But I would definitely say that I'm proud that my father, my grandfather, my guru, my great grandfather, we don't play by the dogma. We truly try to follow the Vedic invitation for equality, for oneness, and for a greater truth. And even before I was born, he had opened the traditional Vedic school, the Gurukulam, to female children, seekers from the lower castes. He was breaking rules all over the place.
Well, that seems to me to be an important model for you. I know, like, I went to India in 1998 for 3 months, and I just traveled around, and I had this idea in the back of my mind, maybe I would find my guru. I didn't find a guru. I mean, I met some interesting teachers, but I didn't find what the idea I had of what a guru was, which I think a lot of people had, and what led to a lot of problems, honestly. This idea of a guru who was sort of like all-seeing, or had some way of knowing what you needed to do and could guide you, as opposed to what you said, which is like it's coming from within you rather than there being some kind of external authority. So maybe you could say, from your lineage perspective, what is it to be a guru, and how does the relationship between like a guru and a disciple express if it's not like the disciple giving over their own agency to the guru?
See, in today's world, the guru concept is really muddled up. In the West and also in India, and Indian gurus are, some, not all of them, but some of them are really taking advantage of it. I think a guru is really no more than a professor. If you want to study arithmetic, at some point you have to surrender your ignorance to your arithmetic teacher at high school or in college, in grad school. And you really have to have a relationship of trust that what your teacher is showing you is right. And then at some point you graduate. And at some point you become equals. You might go on to become an arithmetic whiz, while the professor still remains a professor in an unknown school or college. But when you go back, you say, thank you. So there's endearment and a recognition that you gave me those building blocks by which I could develop my scenario. So the guru in the traditional sense is an expert. A guru is someone who's had the swadharma or the propensity to forever seek. They have resisted the temptations of samsara. They are not lost in fulfilling their needs, artha, or fulfilling their desires, kama. They've always focused on living a life of dharma and pursuing moksha or mukti. And yoga is a way of life, not just something they do for 20 minutes a day, morning and evening. Mm. And naturally, to encounter such a person would be useful if you are a yogi. And number two, if you were to stay with them, you would not give over your agency. Rather, you would have between the two of you a text. You would have a rishi teaching by Rishi Patanjali or Yagnavalkya or Vasishtha or Vedavyasa, and you would have certain texts that we call Shastra between you. And they would begin the teaching. They would not chit-chat with you about your ego. They would teach you about bhakti yoga or jnana yoga or some such thing through which your ego will get transformed. A true teacher would never want you to surrender your ego to them, because that's like taking over someone's demons. But a true teacher would meet you for a specific time and go over a scripture with you, a teaching that is set to decondition you. So, for example, if they were to, if you had questions on bhakti, then you would be said, okay, then what is bhakti? And a true teacher would then answer, sa tvasmin param prema rupa. It is of the nature of the highest love, and Atma Swarupa Cha, that love that you experience for God is really nothing but Amrita Swarupa. It is nothing but the nectar of the self. And where would they be teaching this? From the Narada Bhakti Sutras. So gradually through that teaching, your own samsara, your delusions, your illusions, your ego will first loosen up, then they will be destroyed, and there will be movement of your own ego towards supreme consciousness. And at some point, when you've had that realization, you'll bow to the teacher and say, I will never forget you. Thank you. And then you will leave. But what has it become today? You go to the guru, you bow to them, and they never teach any teachings, any texts. They never go to the ancient Vedic teachings, or some do, but not a bulk of them. In fact, they even deny them and call them all kinds of things where the real knowledge is, and they'll pick one or two words from it, like dharma, chakra, karma, and throw it at you and call it blue light, red light, and you get caught up in a nexus of guru disciple dysfunctionality, really. So, and then a true guru would initially be an acharya for you. An acharya means an ordained teacher. And does an acharya convert to a guru depends on your advanced trust and relationship with them. So it's not like you walk in and you make a guru, but after spending many years with an acharya and really getting worthy knowledge from them, one day you will realize that, oh, this person is my guru because they have given me knowledge that has made my soul take a U-turn. I will never again be caught up with this maya, this avidya, this illusion ever again. And as a result, you give the status of guru to that person. And in the ancient days, we come across one person having more than one guru. And we do not come across gurus being these characters that sit up on grand noble thrones and rule over bent over egos.
Yeah, I heard you also describe submitting to a guru in the same way that you would like submit to a surgeon. At some point, you got to give yourself over to somebody and trust that their expertise is going to serve you.
Precisely.
Yeah. And I also really appreciated something else I heard you talk about, because I've certainly been guilty of this over my days, which is this idea of like somebody coming in to learn in a hot way. Maybe you would share that with the listeners, the hot skillet. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Oh, yeah. There's a story that my guru, my Baba, had shared with me where you could have three frames of mind as a seeker, and sometimes you could be a hot skillet, and it's the heat is from all the passions and all the web surfing, and all the stuff.
Hours and hours of asana or whatever.
Hours and hours of asana and excessive pranayama and and extreme diets and and because of all that heat, the drop of wisdom falls upon you and it disappears. It just
crackles and it makes sounds. It seems like something's happening, but it just evaporates quickly, right?
It just evaporates. And for that moment, you're like, wow, look at the yamas. Wow, the niyamas really got me. And then you're done. A few hours later, you're trying to remember what those yamas and niyamas were, and you're confused. It's all gone. It doesn't stay. And that's why you want a cool mind. Cool like the lotus leaf, or cool like a shell in the river.
The oyster shell.
Examples, the oyster shell, and then just be really like still with that knowledge. Yeah.
Well, I so appreciate that idea of how you interact with the teachings and there being something between the teacher and the student, that it's between them, that there's relationship there. And I guess I am curious because as you described, you use the word ordained, and there's felt like a certain formality around your description of guru. But as I've been listening to some of your podcasts and reading your stuff, and you have this title, Enlightened Vulnerability. And I was quite struck because something that I've employed myself and talked a lot about is that because many of us who are looking to share in yoga teachings together and have taken on the role of a teacher don't have like gurus or are not ordained, in the past, that was how you had like legitimacy, or like you would have credibility. You would cite the teacher who authorized you, the ordained teacher who told you could be a teacher. And a lot of people don't have that. And I think one of the things that people have done to stay honest and to have it be evolving is to have a certain transparency and vulnerability. Like in this show, I started it kind of admitting as a yoga teacher that like I had pain, because a lot of yoga teachers were pretending like they didn't have pain and were putting on their Instagram feeds all these amazing photos of how amazing they were. But then they were like getting hip surgeries and not telling anybody. And I just felt like we had to be honest about what it was really like to be a yoga teacher. And I hear you when you talked about you leaving or having an arranged marriage and having to break from that and being so transparent about that. That seems to me to be kind of an important thing when it comes to this kind of equality. So I'm curious, did your grandfather do that? Was he that kind of transparent and like raw with people?
He was. He shared an open satsang about his, that he was an angry person, that he'd get frustrated easily. And he shared about his vulnerability because he was 9 months old when his mother died, and he would want to suckle her breast and there was no breast. And how he just felt frustrated. But then I also saw how his anger diffused. Like he never hid it. He was open, and gradually it transformed into light. I saw that in him. And so Baba's teaching was that we should be open. And that is the teaching of the Veda too. In fact, we have the teachings of, we have stories of sages who had all kinds of vulnerable issues, but they were really open about it. So it's not a new teaching. In fact, it's about authenticity. But the ordained part was necessary back then. It may not be now, but when we were talking about a traditional guru setup, then in the Vedic sense, a guru always has a guru. They are not self-declared gurus.
Well,
And
self-declared gurus are often real problems in general.
the Veda even recognizes that sometimes there may be one, but then they say, but then that person would not just be like pointing out, I'm a guru, like people would just know.
People would feel that way about them. They would probably try to downplay it or whatever.
Yeah, they'd probably downplay it.
Yeah.
And then the Veda says that probably they had a guru in the immediately previous lifetime, and they were born ripe to be a teacher. And as a result, the Veda was so kind not to judge anyone, but then for the masses, it is better if a teacher has a teacher, and that teacher has a teacher, and that teacher has a teacher, which is a Guru Shishya Parampara, which is now being replaced by probably certification process or apprenticeship or mentoring. So,
if you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.